He's just a failure, my mother whispered loudly enough for half the guests at my graduation to hear, gesturing in my direction as she talked to the dean's wife. Imagine, with all the opportunities one gave him, he chose to be a security guard. A security guard. I stood next to the hors d'oeuvre table at the Columbia University reception, wearing my only decent suit, watching her destroy my reputation in front of people I barely knew. The irony burned more than the embarrassment. Here I was, a recent business graduate with honors, being reduced to a loser by the woman who should have been proud of me. My name is Mike, I'm 28 years old, and I just graduated with an MBA that I paid for entirely on my own after 4 years of serving in the Army. I worked in security to pay for school, but what my mother, Patricia Henderson, didn't understand was that my position at Apex Security Solutions wasn't exactly mall security guard. As an expert in executive protection and threat analysis, I coordinated security for CEOs, diplomats, and high-profile events. The week before, I had led security for an international conference with over 200 high-ranking attendees. But to her, I was just the son who wasted his intelligence. Patricia always measured success by the standards of her Manhattan social elite. As the managing director of a private hospital, she moved among renowned doctors and influential administrators. Our Upper East Side home reflected her ambitions: expensive furniture, carefully selected art, everything calculated to impress. I never fit into that equation. Mike could have been anything, she continued, now speaking to Professor Davidson, my former advisor. Medicine, law, finance. But he chose this, lesser profession. Professor Davidson, who knew my academic and military background, just nodded politely, clearly uncomfortable. He knew that I had written my thesis on corporate crisis management, combining practical experience with academic theory in a way that few of his colleagues had achieved. The party went on like this for another hour. Each introduction followed the same script. This is my son Mike, he works in security, always with that tone that turned a respectable profession into something to be ashamed of. Some guests tried to be kind, thanking me for my service to the community, but I could see the pity in their eyes. When I finally arrived at my apartment in Queens that night, the difference between my real life and my mother's perception of it had never been more apparent. My phone showed 3 messages from work about a new high-priority assignment, 2 calls from colleagues congratulating me on my graduation, and a notification about my pending promotion to regional director. None of that mattered to her. In Patricia Henderson's mind, her son was a failure who chose a career only suitable for people without ambition. What she didn't know was that her narrow definition of success was about to be dramatically challenged. And when that happened, it would be in front of a much larger audience than the guests at that graduation ceremony. If you're following this story of overcoming adversity and want to find out how a mother can be completely wrong about her own son, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because next week would bring me a situation where being just a security guard would mean the difference between life and death for dozens of people. And when the television cameras started rolling, everyone would find out who Mike Henderson really was. My relationship with my mother had deteriorated steadily since I left the Army and joined Apex Security. To Patricia, my decision to serve 4 years had been a rebellious phase that cost me precious time. When I returned determined to build a career in security, she treated it as a personal betrayal. With your IQ and your family connections, she would repeat during our mandatory monthly dinners, you could be making $300,000 a year on Wall Street. Instead, you chose to play private eye. Patricia Henderson built her social identity on being the mother of a future leader. During my childhood, she hosted dinner parties where I was paraded around like an intellectual trophy, reciting poems in French or discussing economic theories at age 12. Her friends would sigh admiringly, "How lucky you are to have such a brilliant son, Patricia." When I chose the Army over Harvard Law School, she stopped mentioning my existence at social gatherings for 2 years. Literally. I discovered this by accident when I met Dr. Morrison, a cardiologist at the hospital where she worked. "Patricia never mentioned that you came back from the military," she said, puzzled. "For years, whenever we asked about you, she would change the subject or say you were finding your way." That was Patricia's strategy: erase my existence until I fit into her narrative of success. When she finally accepted that I wasn't leaving security, she changed tactics. Now I existed again, but as an example of wasted potential. What frustrated me most was her deliberate ignorance about my professional life. The week before graduation, I had coordinated security for a visit by a German minister. 3 days of meticulous planning, coordinating with federal agencies, analyzing routes and diplomatic protocols. The event went off perfectly, without incident. When I mentioned this during our last dinner, she sighed dramatically. Mike, you can sugarcoat it all you want, but at the end of the day, you're still paid to stand around watching doors. It's not surveillance, Mom. It's executive protection and analysis. It's the same thing, she interrupted, cutting a piece of salmon with surgical precision. You're around important people because you couldn't become important enough to have your own security. This twisted logic summed up our dynamic. In Patricia's mind, success meant being protected, not protecting. Leading, not serving. To command, not execute. During the graduation reception, I watched her repeat this narrative to every person she met. Professor Davidson tried to defend my work by mentioning my thesis on crisis management, but she quickly dismissed it. Oh, Mike's always been smart, she said, as if intelligence were some kind of genetic defect. The problem is, he uses that intelligence in the wrong places. Just imagine, coordinating security when he could be coordinating corporate mergers. Dr. Martinez, who taught corporate strategy, seemed genuinely interested in my practical experience. Executive security must offer unique insights into human behavior under pressure, he commented. Before I could respond, Patricia laughed artificially. Mike, don't make your job into something it's not. Dr. Martinez runs entire departments. You're hired to show up. The humiliation burned more than anger. Especially since Dr. Martinez immediately lost interest, clearly uncomfortable with the family dynamic he had witnessed. Later, I overheard Patricia explaining to the dean's wife, "It's painful to see such a capable son choose mediocrity. He could have been a neurosurgeon like Margaret's son, or a partner in a law firm like the Thompsons' boy. But he chose this support role. Support role. As if protecting human lives was less valuable than protecting investment portfolios. What Patricia didn't understand was that my job required exactly the skills she valued: strategic analysis, decision-making under pressure, leadership in critical situations. The difference was that I applied those skills to save lives rather than maximize profits. At Apex, I wasn't just a guard. I was responsible for threat assessments that determined security protocols for multinational CEOs. I wrote intelligence reports that influenced multimillion-dollar corporate decisions. I led teams during events where a single mistake could result in international tragedy. But to my mother, I was the son who chose to serve instead of being served. Driving back to Queens that night, I reflected on how many times I had tried to explain my real job to her. The conversations always ended the same way. She would listen politely, then change the subject to discuss her friend's children's promotions. My phone rang as I stopped at a traffic light. It was James Wong, my supervisor at Apex. Mike, sorry to call so late, but we have a situation for Monday. High-profile event, multiple potential threats. We need our best analyst leading the team. What kind of event? I asked, already mentally organizing protocols. International Technology Conference. 200 executives, including some CEOs who have received recent threats. The FBI is involved. Exactly the kind of assignment Patricia would describe as standing around watching the door. When I hung up, a strange feeling came over me. Something about the timing of that call, right after the humiliation at graduation, seemed almost cinematic. I didn't yet know that Monday would change not only my career, but my mother's entire perspective on who her son really was. Monday arrived with an unexpected call from my Aunt Rebecca, my mother's younger sister. Mike, I need to tell you something. Her voice sounded tense over the phone. Patricia organized a lunch yesterday with her circle from the hospital. And well, she was talking about you. I was in the Apex office, reviewing security protocols for the technology conference, when the call interrupted my concentration. What exactly did she say, Aunt Rebecca? She told all her friends that you graduated, but, Rebecca hesitated. Mike, she said you wasted 4 years in the army and now you work as a mall security guard. She said it's embarrassing to have to explain why her son chose such a common profession. My fist tightened involuntarily around the phone. Mall security guard? She mimicked you standing next to a door, pretending to check IDs, Rebecca continued, clearly embarrassed. The women laughed, Mike. They laughed at your military career and your current job. Patricia said you could have been anything important, but you chose to be just a uniformed employee. Uniformed employee. As if coordinating the security of international diplomats was equivalent to checking wallets at the entrance to a shopping mall. There's more. Rebecca took a deep breath. She showed her photos of you at graduation to prove how ordinary you look now, comparing them to old photos of you as a teenager. She said you lost all that intellectual promise. The humiliation burned deeper than anger. Not only had she diminished my career in front of strangers during graduation, but now she was organizing specific lunches to spread this narrative to her entire social circle. Dr. Matthews was there, Rebecca added quietly. She mentioned that his son just got accepted into the cardiology residency at Johns Hopkins. Patricia used that to contrast your disappointing career choice. I hung up feeling something I had never experienced before, not just frustration at my mother's ignorance, but genuine humiliation at being used as a negative example in social circles where important people networked and built reputations. James Wong appeared at my workstation 20 minutes later. Mike, are you okay? You seem distracted. Family problems, I replied briefly, trying to focus on the threat reports scattered across my desk. Well, maybe this will help distract you, he said, pulling up a chair. Today's conference is bigger than we initially thought. 250 executives, including the CEO of Technova Industries, who received specific death threats last week. The FBI wants a full briefing on our assessment. Technova Industries, one of the largest technology companies in the country, with a CEO who regularly appeared on the covers of business magazines. Exactly the kind of client that required years of specialized training and expertise in behavioral analysis to properly protect. How many federal agents will be involved? I asked, my mind automatically organizing protocols. 6, plus our team of 12. You'll lead the interagency coordination, James replied. The event is at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. 3 floors, multiple entry points, significant logistical complications. Grand Metropolitan Hotel. The same place my mother often held charity events for the hospital, where she boasted of having important connections and privileged access to the city's elite circles. An idea began to form in my mind. James, who else will be there besides the tech executives? Investors, some business journalists, government officials. Why? Just checking the risk profiles, I lied partially. When does it start? 11 a.m. briefing at 9. 2 hours to finalize my plans. I grabbed my phone and typed a message to Patricia. Mom, I know you're busy, but I'd like to have lunch today if possible. There's something important I need to discuss about my career. Her reply came quickly. Finally. I hope it's about considering more appropriate alternatives. I can meet you at 12:30 at Le Bernardin. I'll reserve a table. Le Bernardin. One of the most expensive and exclusive restaurants in the city, frequented by the elite she so admired. Perfect. Over the next 2 hours, I coordinated the most complex security protocols of my career. 3 complete sweeps of the hotel, strategic positioning of federal agents, analysis of evacuation routes, and coordination of communications between multiple agencies. The kind of operation that required exactly the military experience and specialized training my mother considered wasted. At 10:45, I received confirmation that all systems were operational. The CEO of Technova had arrived safely, without incident. Multiple potential threats had been identified and neutralized through our prior analysis. Impeccable work, Mike, commented FBI agent Sullivan. I rarely see such efficient coordination between agencies. Do you have military experience? 4 years in the Army, specializing in threat analysis and high-value target protection, I replied. Show me. Your risk assessment saved us at least 2 hours of preparation time. At 11:15, my phone rang. It was Patricia. Mike, I need to cancel lunch. Something important has come up. Actually, Mom, I'm at the Grand Metropolitan right now. For work. Could you swing by here quickly? I promise it won't take long. Silence on the other end of the line. You're working at the Grand Metropolitan? Yes. International Technology Conference. Coordinating security for 250 executives, including some CEOs you'd probably recognize from magazines. More silence. What kind of coordination? Threat analysis, executive protection, joint operation with the FBI. The usual. FBI. Her voice rose an octave. Yes, we've received specific threats against some of the participants. I'm leading the interagency coordination. For the first time in years, Patricia was genuinely speechless. Mom, are you still there? Yes. Mike, are you saying you're responsible for the safety of important CEOs? Among other things, yes. It's literally my job. But you said you work in security. I thought. You thought I checked bags at the entrance to shopping malls, I finished. But you never asked what I actually do. The silence stretched on for almost 30 seconds. Can I see where you work? Sure. But you'll need to go through security first. As I waited for my mother to arrive, a strange sense of calm settled over me. For years, I had tried to explain my career to her through words. Today, she would see it through actions. And when Patricia Henderson discovered that her failed son was literally protecting the same people she admired in the newspapers, her narrow definition of success would face its first real test. What she didn't know yet was that this would be only the first surprise of many that this day had in store. Patricia arrived at the Grand Metropolitan 30 minutes later, visibly nervous and trying to maintain her usual composure. I watched her through the security cameras as she approached the reception desk, adjusting her hair and checking her appearance in the reflection of the glass doors. Even so, it was impossible to hide the anxiety in her movements. Ms. Henderson? A hotel security guard approached her in the lobby. I'm Agent Martinez. Your son has requested that we escort you to the operations area. I could see from her expression that the word operations caught her off guard. For years, she had imagined my work to be basic and manual. The idea that I could have an operations area in a 5-star hotel clearly didn't fit into her narrative. The elevator rose to the 15th floor, where our command center had been set up. Multiple monitors displayed security camera feeds, maps of the building with checkpoints marked, and lists of participants being updated in real time. 6 federal agents worked alongside our team, all focused on their respective responsibilities. Mike. Patricia's voice sounded small as she entered the room. Mom, I greeted her, without taking my eyes off the screens. Agent Sullivan, this is my mother, Patricia Henderson. Mom, this is Agent Sullivan from the FBI. The agent turned, extending his hand professionally. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Henderson. Your son is coordinating one of the most complex security operations I've ever seen. His military experience and threat analysis saved hours of preparation. Patricia accepted the greeting but remained silent, absorbing her surroundings. Computers, communications equipment, federal agents treating her son like an authority figure in the room. Mike is leading our interagency coordination, Sullivan continued. We identified 3 potential threats against participants before the conference even began. Your preventive screening protocol is impressive. Preventive scanning protocol, she repeated weakly. Behavioral analysis combined with open-source intelligence, I explained, still monitoring the screens. We identify threat patterns across multiple data sources, then implement specific countermeasures for each risk level. James Wong approached at that moment, carrying a tablet with updates. Mike, we've received confirmation from the State Department. Technova's CEO has had his threat level raised to red. We've intercepted communications suggesting an attempted approach during the lunch break. Implement Charlie Protocol, I replied immediately. Reposition teams 3 and 4 to corridors adjacent to the main hall. Communicate the change of route to the main hall. Understood, James confirmed, already relaying the instructions via radio. Patricia watched all this with an increasingly perplexed expression. For 15 minutes, she watched me coordinate the movements of federal agents, make decisions that affected the safety of hundreds of people, and be treated like an expert by professionals she clearly respected. Mike, she finally managed to say when there was a pause in the activity. I didn't know that your job was complex, strategic, important. I finished, finally turning to face her directly. She blushed. I thought you just stood around at events. Standing around is exactly what we don't do, Agent Sullivan said, listening to our conversation. High-level executive security requires constant anticipation, analysis of multiple variables, coordination with federal agencies. It's literally impossible to do this job without advanced military training and years of specialized experience. My phone rang at that moment. It was Rebecca again. Mike, your mother called to cancel your lunch date. She said she was checking something about your work. What's going on? She's realizing she may have underestimated my career, I replied, watching Patricia talk nervously with one of the communications technicians. Finally. I hope this opens her eyes. We're still in the process, I said, but yes, it's been educational. I hung up and focused on the next phase of my plan. What Patricia didn't know was that today's conference was just the warm-up. In fact, I had accepted an even bigger assignment for the following week, coordinating security for an international summit that would be broadcast live nationwide. If she wanted to see her failure of a son in action, I would make sure she had the best view possible. Mom, I got her attention. There's something I need to tell you. She came closer, still processing everything she had witnessed. Next week, I'll be leading security for the Technological Innovation Summit at the Convention Center. 200 world leaders, live broadcast to 60 countries, coverage by all the major news networks. You'll be on television? Not exactly. I'll be coordinating the operation behind the scenes. But yes, it's the kind of event that gets national news coverage. Her expression changed gradually, as if processing the implications. And you're in charge. Lead security coordinator, working directly with the Secret Service and international agencies. The kind of assignment only the best specialists in the country get. Patricia sat down in a nearby chair, clearly overwhelmed. Mike, I need to apologize. For what? For everything. For not understanding your job. For belittling you in front of people. She hesitated. For telling my friends that you're just a regular security guard. Just a regular security guard. The words Rebecca had mentioned this morning. How many people have you told this, Mom? She seemed to shrink. A few. At lunch yesterday, I mentioned it to several colleagues at the hospital. And what exactly did you say? That you wasted your education by choosing a working-class profession. The words came out like a confession. That I was ashamed to have to explain why my brilliant son chose such an ordinary job. There it was. The complete humiliation finally verbalized. I see, I said calmly. And these colleagues of yours, do they have children too? Yes, why? Do any of them work in fields you consider prestigious? Well, yes. Dr. Morrison's son is a neurosurgeon. The head nurse's boy is a partner in a law firm. And you used my career to contrast their successes? Awkward silence confirmed my suspicion. Mom, I want you to know something. Next week, when the summit is broadcast nationally, my name will appear in the credits as lead security coordinator. Reporters will likely mention our team during their coverage. Her eyes widened. Your name is going to be on television? It's possible. And when it is, your friends at the hospital will find out exactly what your failure of a son really does for a living. The realization hit her like a brick. If you've been following this journey of recognition and want to see how a misperception can be dramatically corrected, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the outcome. Mike, she said weakly, what can I do to fix this? Honestly? Nothing. The words have been spoken. Your friends have already formed their opinions about my career based on what you told them. But if I explain that I was wrong, that would only confirm that you spoke about me without any real knowledge of what I do. That you publicly humiliated your own son based on deliberate ignorance. Patricia covered her face with her hands. I've ruined everything, haven't I? Before I could respond, James approached with a serious expression. Mike, we have a situation. We've intercepted chatter about a possible threat against next week's event. The FBI wants an emergency briefing with you in 2 hours. What kind of threat? Domestic terrorist group. Apparently they've chosen the summit as a symbolic target. You're the only coordinator with sufficient clearance to access the classified details. The irony was almost comical. While my mother was finally grasping the importance of my job, I was about to face the most dangerous and high-profile assignment of my career. Mom, I said, getting ready to leave, I suggest you start rethinking your conversations with your friends. Because if next week goes as I expect, Everyone in the country will know exactly who Mike Henderson is. And as she sat in the command center, surrounded by federal agents and state-of-the-art equipment, I knew that her narrow definition of success was about to face the most public test possible. What she didn't realize was that the next week would not only put my work in the national spotlight, but also reveal just how dangerous and essential my profession really was. The Technology Innovation Summit began promptly at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. 230 world leaders, multinational CEOs, and government representatives gathered at the convention center for 3 days of discussions that would shape the future of global technology. 17 television networks broadcast live to 62 countries. I coordinated everything from the command center on the 23rd floor, surrounded by Secret Service agents, the FBI, and my team from Apex. Dozens of monitors displayed camera feeds, thermal maps of the building, and real-time communications traffic analysis. North perimeter status? I asked into the microphone, simultaneously coordinating 6 different teams. North perimeter secure. 2 suspects identified and removed during routine sweep, Agent Torres replied. It was 10:15 when the first anomaly appeared on our systems. A communication pattern that didn't fit the normal traffic for the event. Specific frequencies being used in sequences that suggested coordination. James, I called my supervisor, we're detecting suspicious chatter on channel 16. The pattern suggests multiple operators moving into position. He approached, watching the data on the screen. How many? At least 6, possibly 8. Standard military equipment, encrypted communications. It was exactly the scenario we had feared during the security briefings. The domestic terrorist group had chosen the dome as a symbolic target, but we didn't expect them to penetrate our security perimeter. At 10:43, everything changed. Command, we have confirmed hostile movement in the underground parking garage. Agent Sullivan's voice crackled over the radio, tense and urgent. Multiple armed individuals, explosives confirmed. My military training kicked in instantly. Implement Emergency Protocol Alpha. All teams to contingency positions. Begin controlled evacuation of the main floor. Mike, James whispered, there are 230 people in the main auditorium. If we attempt a mass evacuation, it could cause panic and give the attackers an advantage, I finished. We need to neutralize the threat before they reach the upper floors. That's when my phone rang. It was Patricia. Mike, I'm watching the summit on TV at the hospital with some colleagues. They're impressed that you're involved. One of them said your name appeared in the credits as lead coordinator. Mom, now's not a good time, I replied, watching the security feeds show armed men climbing the emergency stairs. But Mike, Dr. Morrison wants to know if you could. MOM, I interrupted, firmer than I intended. Not now. There's an emergency. What kind of emergency? Before she could answer, explosions echoed through the lower floors of the building. Lights flickered, and emergency alarms began to sound. In the main auditorium, visible panic began among the summit attendees. Command to all units, I said into the radio, my voice cutting through the confusion. We have confirmed hostile infiltration. Implementing lockdown protocol. Teams 3 and 4, intercept on the 12th floor. Teams 5 and 6, secure the VIP evacuation routes. Mike. Patricia's voice sounded small over the phone. What's going on? Terrorists have attacked the event, I replied bluntly, with no time for diplomacy. I'm coordinating the response. There was complete silence on the other end of the line. Over the next 15 minutes, I coordinated the most complex counterterrorism operation of my career. Through the communication system, I directed 12 different teams while analyzing hostile movements in real time. Team Alpha, they're using the ventilation ducts to bypass our checkpoints. Reposition to the East Corridor, level 15. Command, we have 2 hostages on the 18th floor, reported Agent Martinez. Team Bravo, do you have a clear view? Affirmative. Awaiting orders to intervene. Authorized. Neutralize the threat, prioritize the safety of the hostages. The television cameras continued to broadcast, but now they showed our command center in action. The major networks had decided to cover the emergency live, and my face appeared periodically on the screens coordinating the response. At the hospital where Patricia was watching with her colleagues, The television volume had been turned up. The caption on the screen read, "Security Coordinator Mike Henderson leads real-time anti-terrorist response." "Patricia," whispered Dr. Morrison, "your son is on television coordinating an anti-terrorist operation." "Is this the same Mike you said works as a mall security guard?" asked the head nurse, confused. Patricia couldn't answer, watching her failed son direct a military operation on national television. At 11:22, I located the leader of the terrorist group through communications analysis. All teams, primary target identified. 20th floor, conference room B. He has a direct line of sight to the main auditorium. "Command, he's armed with a sniper rifle," reported Agent Torres. "He can hit anyone on the main stage." It was my most critical decision. Sending teams directly would result in an armed confrontation with a high risk of casualties. But allowing him to hold his position meant a constant threat to world leaders in the auditorium. "Team Charlie, can you access the outside window?" "Negative, too windy for a safe rappel." "Then we'll use the ventilation system," I decided. "Delta Team, follow my instructions for a silent approach route." For 12 minutes, I led an infiltration through the ventilation ducts that culminated in the neutralization of the main shooter without a shot being fired. Simultaneously, the other teams neutralized the remaining attackers using precise coordination based on my real-time analysis. "All threats neutralized," I announced over the communications system. "Building secure. Cancel emergency protocols." The main auditorium erupted in applause when the announcement was broadcast. 230 world leaders had been protected by an operation that many military experts would later describe as textbook perfect. Television cameras showed my face as I announced the neutralization of the threat. Captions appeared identifying me as the lead coordinator responsible for saving hundreds of lives. At the hospital, Patricia remained silent as her colleagues watched in disbelief. "Patricia," Dr. Morrison said slowly, "you told us your son was a simple security guard who wasted his education." "She said he worked at a shopping mall," added the head nurse. "And that it was embarrassing to explain his profession," added a third colleague. Patricia Henderson, who had spent years humiliating her own son in social circles, now watched that same son save human lives on national television, being praised by military experts and recognized as a hero by world leaders. My phone rang again. It was her. "Mike," her voice trembled, "I just watched you save hundreds of people on television." "Yes, Mom. It's literally my job." As television networks began broadcasting expert analysis of the operation, one thing became absolutely clear: the failure Patricia had spent years belittling had just executed one of the most successful counterterrorism operations in modern history. And everyone had watched. 3 hours after the operation, I was at the hotel giving press interviews when my phone rang again. It was Rebecca. "Mike, you need to know what happened at the hospital." Her voice was tense, but there was something different in her tone. "Patricia is, well, she's facing an embarrassing situation." "What do you mean?" After you finished talking, she sat in the hospital lounge with her colleagues. They were all watching the news about you. And then Dr. Morrison asked her a direct question. Rebecca took a deep breath before continuing. She asked, "Patricia, wasn't it you who said yesterday at lunch that your son was a failure who wasted his life working as a mall security guard?" The silence was deafening, Mike. The irony didn't escape me. For years, Patricia had used social gatherings to belittle my career. Now these same people were confronting her with her own words as they watched her failure of a son being praised nationally as a hero. And what did she say? Nothing. Literally nothing. She just sat there while her colleagues watched report after report about security coordinator Mike Henderson, who saved hundreds of lives with a flawless counterterrorism operation. Over the next few weeks, the story spread in ways that neither Patricia nor I could have predicted. The media coverage was extensive. CNN, Fox News, NBC, all the major networks did special reports on the operation. I was invited to talk shows, received recognition from federal agencies, and my promotion at Apex came with a significant pay raise. More important than the public recognition was the fundamental change in my relationship with my mother. Patricia didn't call me immediately after the events. In fact, 2 weeks passed before we had direct contact. When it finally happened, it was through a handwritten letter, something she had never done before. "Mike," the letter began, "there are no words adequate to express my shame. Not just for my ignorance about his career, but for the systematic cruelty with which I treated his choices. She described how she had faced embarrassing questions from colleagues at the hospital, all wanting to know why she had called a national hero a failure. How could she explain that she had purposely diminished someone whose competence was being celebrated internationally? I realized that my blind pride prevented me from seeing not only what you do, but who you are, the letter continued. A man of integrity who dedicates his life to protecting others. A respected professional who coordinates life-saving operations. A son whom I should have supported instead of humiliating. The letter also revealed how she had been forced to confront her own insecurities. For years, Patricia had measured success by the limited standards of her social circle, because it was easier to follow external metrics than to develop a genuine understanding of value. I realized that my need for social validation blinded me to the reality of my own son. I used you as a negative example to feel superior, when in fact you were building a life far more meaningful than anything I had achieved. 3 weeks after the events, Patricia asked to meet with me in person. We chose a neutral cafe in Midtown, far from both the hospital where she worked and Apex headquarters. When she arrived, Patricia seemed different. Less rigid, more vulnerable. For the first time in years, she wasn't dressed to impress, but simply as herself. "Mike," she began hesitantly, "I watched every interview, read every article about the operation. And what impressed me most wasn't just your technical competence, but your humility and leadership under pressure." I remained silent, allowing her to continue. "I spent years criticizing your choices based on complete ignorance. I never asked for details about your work, never showed genuine interest in your professional life. I simply decided that because you weren't following the path I had planned, you were failing." She paused, clearly struggling with emotion. "When your colleagues at the hospital confronted me about my words, I realized something terrible. I had become exactly the kind of person I had always criticized, someone who judges without knowledge, who diminishes others to feel important. Mom," I finally said, "I appreciate your honesty. But real change requires more than acknowledging past mistakes." "I know. And I want to start by asking you, can you really explain to me what you do at your job? Not to excuse me, but because I genuinely want to understand the life my son has built." We spent the next 2 hours talking about my career in more depth than we ever had before. I explained threat analysis, interagency coordination, executive protection protocols. Patricia asked intelligent questions, showing genuine interest. "You literally save lives," she said at the end, "and I called that a failure. What kind of mother does that?" "A mother who was operating out of fear and limited expectations," I replied. "But one who can choose change." In the months that followed, our relationship underwent a gradual but profound transformation. Patricia began mentioning my work with genuine pride to her colleagues, correcting years of negative narratives. When I received the Safety Professional of the Year award, she was in the front row, applauding with tears in her eyes. The most significant change was her overall approach to life. Patricia began therapy to examine her own insecurities and behavior patterns. She recognized that she had used criticism of others as a mechanism to avoid confronting her own limitations. I discovered that my compulsive need to measure success by external standards came from a fear that my own life wasn't meaningful enough, she confessed to me over dinner 6 months later. "It was easier to diminish your choices than to question my own." A year after the summit, Patricia organized a special dinner. She invited the same colleagues she had disparaged in front of me, this time for a formal presentation about my current work. "I want you to meet my son Mike," she told the assembled group, "a security expert who coordinates protection for world leaders and life-saving counterterrorism operations. Someone who dedicates his career to protecting important people, including people like you." The difference in tone was remarkable. There was no longer embarrassment or excuses, but genuine pride and real understanding of the value of my work. During the presentation, I explained case studies of operations I had coordinated, protocols I had developed, and collaborations with federal agencies. Patricia's colleagues' questions were respectful and interested, recognizing the complexity and importance of the profession she had previously called wasted potential. "Patricia," Dr. Morrison commented at the end of the evening, "you must be incredibly proud to have raised a son with such dedication to public service." "I am," Patricia replied simply. "And I'm sorry it took me so long to recognize that." The deepest lesson from this experience was understanding how our own insecurities can blind us to the people closest to us. Patricia spent years projecting her anxieties about social status onto me, unable to see the real value of what I was building. Today, our relationship is grounded in mutual respect and genuine understanding. Patricia not only accepts my career, she has become one of my biggest advocates. When people ask her about my work, she responds with detailed knowledge and obvious pride. For me, the real victory wasn't the national recognition or the professional awards. It was seeing my mother grow as a person, confront her own limitations, and develop a real ability to see value beyond superficial metrics of success. If you've ever faced situations where those close to you have underestimated your value or diminished your achievements, know that the most important validation comes from living your values authentically. External recognition is rewarding, but true satisfaction comes from knowing that you are making a real difference in the world. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about overcoming adversity, belated recognition, and the transformative power of staying true to your principles even when others can't see your value. As for Patricia, last week, she called me to say that a new employee at the hospital had mentioned working in corporate security. I told her about you, Patricia said proudly. And I asked if she could teach me more about the field. It's never too late to learn, right? No, Mom. It's never too late to recognize that true failure isn't choosing a different path, but refusing to see the value in those we love.